You guys both look great, by the way. I just gotta say, you're all dressed up. I feel a little not dressed enough for the occasion.
All for you.
Okay, so things seem to be looking pretty good for the Democrats right now.
Is that a weird sentence to say out loud?
What, that things seem to be looking pretty good for the Democrats? Yeah, I did not expect this to happen.
Yeah.
I thought that, like, I mean, the only thing I thought that would carry, if you asked me 2 weeks ago or a week ago, like, who's going to win, I'd be like, I mean, it's pretty likely that the Republicans are going to run the table. But I mean, we didn't have a lot of polling information. I don't know if that was on purpose or not. I mean, there were polls, but it wasn't like the general election. I feel like there's a lot of exhaustion. I think people are just like exhausted by even following elections. I don't think people care about it as much. Clearly, it was impossible to avoid the elections in Georgia with all the ads that they were pumping in that market. But I really thought that it was going to be the most predictable outcome, which is Republicans winning. But I was wrong, and I think that a big part of that is because of Donald Trump and the gift that he gave to the Democratic Party in a moment of weakness and anger against Mitch McConnell for daring to admit the reality that Joe Biden is the next president. Talking about the 2K, the veto for the NDAA, which was unrelated to that, but still that was also helpful in extending the conversation around 2K. Democrats actually having a unifying moment in the national stage and centering this race around $2,000, despite the fact that Joe Biden didn't do that until later. I think this all worked in their favor, right?
And your favorite, Wasserman, just called it.
Yeah, Dave Wasserman just called it.
No, Hasan, I think you kind of extra hate the dude, don't you?
I think, I'm not a big fan of Dave Wasserman. I think he's a huge liberal, and I don't like it when analysts are they play the role of punditry, and that's part of the reason why I criticize Nate Silver a lot too. At least I admit that I'm a dumb himbo who doesn't know anything. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, he can kind of be a jerk sometimes too, which is
we
need that from our analysts. Like, that's fine from himbos and from jerks, but we don't want that from analysts.
Exactly.
Be nice.
Exactly.
But nevertheless, he has said he has seen enough on Warnock, not yet on Ossoff, which is
it's trending that way for Ossoff though.
Yeah, it's looking pretty good for Ossoff too, right? Yeah. So, what do you guys think? What are the main reasons? I mean, it's not over yet, but we're talking a little bit like it's over. But let's talk about Warnock, which we all are, I guess, assuming is over, right? Like, what do you think is the big factor here?
I don't want to monopolize, but I mean, from being there, like real quickly, I've been on a bunch of shows. I'm trying to get less rambly as I do this. I'm bad start already. But Warnock ran this really smart campaign since November. So he needed to get through the runoff. He did, or to the runoff. He immediately reintroduced himself with this ad that everyone's seen now, where they're going to say, "I hate puppies. I love puppies," and he had the kind of ads that get you dragged on Twitter because that people say, "What is this about?" But he had a series of ads where he was just playing with the dogs, making fun of Kelly Loeffler running negative ads. And in addition to that, he was running on this substantive agenda. I mean, if you watch TV, you clicked on YouTube in Georgia, you saw ads for him and for Ossoff running before videos, and they were just 5 seconds. Do you want $2,000 checks? Vote on Tuesday. Do you want student debt relief? Vote. So they had this combination of we're running a positive campaign and we're doing stuff, and they had some negativity on the stock trade scandal. That was their main hit point on Purdue and Loeffler. But it was a combination of really good branding and stuff, and like stuff they would do. And I feel like I didn't quite appreciate that until I was in Georgia, how much they were just, hey, this is a transaction. You are going to get stuff if you vote for us. We're not running on unity or love Trump's hate or stronger togetherness.
Or Ossoff's original congressional race where he got owned.
Oh, God.
Which was literally the worst. The worst possible campaign that you could run. And even I noticed that I knew that Warnock was going to definitely run on the issues, but I was surprised to see how much John Ossoff was also on board with identifying the $2,000 direct cash payments and centering his campaign around key policy issues, progressive policy issues. It's almost like leftists were correct when they say, like, run on issues. It's going to help you. Even before Donald Trump actually gave us an additional boost there, or the Democrats an additional boost there. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I think Dave is the one I saw point out on Twitter that Warnock himself ran a direct ad on the $2,000 checks. Like, you want a $2,000 check? Vote for Raphael Warnock. Joe Biden at that moment of him at the rally, where he says, if you elect the Reverend and you elect John, you will get a $2,000 check, and all your loved ones will get a $2,000 check, and all the people around the country who are in desperate need will get a $2,000 check, and nobody has that power other than you. And if you do it, it will happen immediately. Like, that was a remarkable moment, and it it helps cement the idea that this is what this is about. And in a race where things are so close, if you can move a few tens of thousands of people one direction or another, that really matters. I think there are also, to Dave's earlier point, some really interesting kind of racial dynamics at play here, because the reason that we have runoffs in the Senate is specifically and explicitly so that Black candidates cannot be elected in the South. Like, that is why runoffs were created, so that in a situation where you have, let's say, a 40% Black population in an area, that you couldn't have a split white vote and a Black candidate is elected. So the South put into place these runoffs. If you don't get 50%, then you have to face off one against one. So it would be a Black candidate against a white candidate, and the white candidate would win. Like, that's the design. That's part of it. But then the other racial dynamics that are at play are what Black candidates are allowed to do versus what white candidates are allowed to do in campaigns. And Black candidates are not allowed by our culture, our political culture, to get as aggressive and to attack as much as white candidates are. Because then you're scaring white people away, and you're looking like an angry Black man. And so by being able to run as a tag team, that sort of allowed Warnock to do the puppy ad, to do he did this great ad where he's like pulling his Christmas lights out of a box, trying to disentangle them, showing, like, he's basically saying, and a lot of white women in the ads, saying, like, look, I'm not threatening. I want a better world for everybody. And it's not even very subtle what he's saying to people. He's trying to ease racial anxieties. But then at the same time, you've got Ossoff, who's then throwing haymakers one after the other at Republican corruption and Republican insider trading, and it very much helped that both of them were criminals in the way that they had the same,
in a really understandable way. Like, you could explain it in 5 seconds what they did.
Right. Yeah, right. It's great that they were both caught insider trading. That's basically, because if one was a financial criminal of a different sort, it would be maybe a little bit more difficult to describe. But they literally both
commit the same
profited.
crime.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I think that is really interesting.
So Ossoff went a lot more negative. Like, he was the bad cop in a way.
Yeah, totally.
Like, his ads were like, right.
And you saw that in that Fox
Dave,
News interview he did in the final weekend. Can you hear me? I thought you said, "Hey, Dave."
Mm-hmm. No.
But yeah, you saw it in the final weekend. Like, Fox News is at his campaign stop, and he just does an impromptu interview with them, and just keeps saying that Kelly Loeffler campaigned with the Klansmen. But Warnock couldn't do that. I mean, Warnock didn't want to get into that kind of fight. He did a couple times. When she'd hit him, he'd say she's campaigned with Marjorie Taylor Greene and QAnon. She's campaigned with the Klansmen. But that dynamic is just what Ryan said. Whenever Ossoff had the opportunity, he's the one who went kind of, the Spyro Agnew, below the belt candidate, and Warnock got to float, which worked for him because he was the one getting, probably by the end, $200 million in negative ads dumped on him.
I think, yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think a big advantage in that dynamic for Warnock was also the fact, like, the reason why he ran specifically a positive-only ad campaign for the most part, I think, was because there was so much more. I mean, he's a black pastor, he's a black reverend. Like, if you look at any sort of like black liberation theology, like, there's going to be some radical takes that you hear. That's why they were literally tying him to Obama's original pastor, Jeremiah Wright, in an I would even say very racist way, where they were just like, that's a black pastor, this is a black pastor. If you guys remember, like, they were using the "goddamn America" quote, and it's not even like, that's not even Warnock's own quote. Like, it's very clearly clip chimped from him talking about the issue, and they didn't really care. And I think that Warnock running an overall positive campaign in that way probably contributed. Do you think that that's the reason why he's getting more votes, or do you think it's just because, like, Loeffler is really weak as a candidate, as far as candidates goes, both because she's elitist and you can literally tell that she is, and also because she was appointed to that position rather than elected?
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in. Yes, she was clearly, and I think exit polling is going to get adjusted. She had lower favorables than him. I mean, the first thing people got to know about her was that she made the stock trade, so that didn't help. But she had this primary, and Doug Collins, the Republican impeachment manager, ran against her. He had his primary where she ran really hard to the right, ran this ad, a series of ads that called her more conservative than Attila the Hun.
Yeah.
And it never scanned. I mean, I noticed the ambient noise. I noticed was like, I would tweet just a clip of her talking, or I'd tweet a quote. Twitter, it's what it is. But I wouldn't even understand how it looked to people who were not on a campaign trail, because they were like, I did one the other night where she was rattling off, we're going to fight cancel culture and protect life and all this, and everyone's reaction was like, do people believe this? I mean, she had a very awkward transition she'd never run for anything. Very awkward transition as a candidate, and just never seemed real. She always seemed like she knew what to say to the people, at her rallies.
But it was so fake.
It didn't seem real. Yeah.
It was as fake as her. I kept saying this, like, I have no evidence for this, but I suspect that the photo with the Klansman that came out was 100% an op from her own team to, like, leak that photo so she looks more Georgian, so that people will talk about her with a Klansman, and then, like, Democrats will hit on her on that, and then they can turn around and counter message around it and be like, oh, look, the Democrats are going crazy again, saying I'm with a Klansman, to, like, show that she was more with it, to seem more Georgian than she actually is. Like, I literally, like, it was like she would just turn up the racism dial a little bit, or go out and, like, skeet shoot or something every time she wanted to appear more Georgian. And it was so transparently pandering that I was shocked that, like, Republicans would eat that up and truly believe it. It's obvious. It's as obvious as her denim America flag trucker hat, that it's just out of place. Like, she's very clearly an elitist, like, very rich billionaire wife who doubled her fucking wealth since the pandemic started. And I don't know. It was just, she was so horrifically unlikable.
Yeah. So that's a half point, maybe, all of that together, because there's so much partisanship. And then, you add on top of that the Purdue name in Georgia still has some residual affinity with some sectors of the Republican Party down there. So you could plausibly see people who, like, oh yeah, I like Sonny Perdue, David's probably fine. And then you tack on top of that misogyny. I'm sure you could dig up political science articles about Republican voters that would show, like, a small difference, but statistically significant difference in their willingness to vote for a man versus a woman. And then when you pile onto it the type of candidate that Loeffler was, then I think you almost end up being amazed that the gap was only as big as it was.
Yeah.
But then it comes back to just partisanship. People just voting their ticket, like no matter whose name is there.
So I have to jump off. There's a update. I have to do another thing that I agreed to before you called me. I'll let you guys keep talking. I can come in later. I might just DM you if there's time for me later.
You can jump in whenever you want.
All right. Well, good to talk now. I was on for the Wasserman call. That's history, I guess. Yeah.
That is history. Dave has seen enough.
All right. I'll see you guys.
All right. Bye. All right, Ryan. So, what do you think makes up for the disparity between the amount of votes for Loeffler versus Perdue, though? Aside from the fact that like Perdue's name carries weight, like how does that work? Do you think that there's like just a bunch of Republicans out there who are like literally voting for Perdue and then going and voting for Warnock? Obviously not. Are they just like, are some people just voting for Warnock and not for Ossoff? Like, how do you think that works?
I think I think there might be enough, because you're talking really small numbers at this point, to make up that gap. So there are definitely some who are plugged in enough who know that Republicans actually only need to win one of those two seats to hold on to the Senate. And so if you're a Republican and you want to hold on to the Senate, you're probably gonna go in there and vote for Perdue and leave the other one blank. Which we can analyze later. Like we can look at like total numbers of votes. Like you can, total numbers of voters, and then see if there's, how many people left different races blank. And so I bet a significant amount of the difference will be not that people voted for Warnock necessarily, but just left that one blank. But you also might find, a few, the thing is, when you go out and talk to voters about politics, you're going to find plenty of people who just have no coherent, view of, how they see politics. And because whatever, $500 million was spent advertising in this race, it was more like a general election than like a runoff. Because with a runoff, you get more plugged in voters who come out. But with when the same turnout for a general election applies to a runoff, then you're going to get a lot of cranks who come out too. And so some of those cranks are just going to have more eclectic views of politics and might say, you know what, we need balance. And they don't like women, so they vote Perdue. But I actually think you can explain basically all of it with the combination of a uniquely terrible candidate, never elected, was appointed to the Senate, Purdue's solid name, and a little bit of misogyny. Yeah, and probably some people probably just don't like Ossoff. Like he probably rubs some people the wrong way.
You think Ossoff rubbed people the wrong way? Really? Like,
I mean, a few. Like, if 10,000 or whatever might be like, I'm not voting for this twerp.
Maybe. I think representation in that circumstance was probably helpful too. No, I feel like black voter turnout is obviously key here. That was what was the main driver of the difference in the votes. And I feel like representation in that circumstance means something, especially because this isn't like fucking Kanye West. This is an actual black reverend in the South. So like a respectable community leader that has been around for a very long time. It almost perfectly works with Stacey Abrams' organizing strategy, which is not necessarily organizing 4 years before an election, or not necessarily organizing immediately up to an election or before an election, but organizing year round. And if anything, Raphael Warnock has been a community organizer and a community leader for a very long time. So I think that probably factors into it as well. Go ahead.
No, yeah, the other part that fits with Abrams' strategy for running different campaigns in Georgia is to stop trying to just appeal to white voters and just assume that black voters are going to come along. You know, her argument was, if you can energize black voters, there are enough of them that will come out, and they will combine in coalition with energized progressive white voters who are not racist, or who are, you know, willing to vote for Democrats, not because you're just the slightly lesser Republican, but you still express some racial anxieties, but just do them more gently than the Republicans do. But you're coming forward as an actual progressive. And her argument was, there are enough people that are willing to do that you don't have to run like the old kind of Georgia Democrat or the old Arkansas Democrat, or, you know, the typical Democrat in the South was socially conservative, you know, anti-gay, you know, expressed racial animosity through different dog whistles, was misogynistic on some levels to show a Southern machismo, and just culturally conservative, and then also economically conservative, you know, for austerity, for, you know, cutting the deficit, for cutting taxes on the rich. It was just basically a Republican, but a more moderate Republican, just running as a Democrat. That was the old model, and that's not at all how Warnock and Ossoff ran.
Yeah, doesn't this destroy that?
Yeah.
Let's get to the heart of this matter here, Ryan. The gloating part of the conversation. Now, the race is not over yet. Things may change. It does seem like the Cobb County.
So we better hurry up and gloat.
Yeah, is heavily favoring Democrats. So that's what's. Although Loeffler and Perdue are currently up, that the Cobb County votes are going to end up securing the victory for both of the Democratic candidates here. But it does seem like this election, where senators, whether they on accident or whether they were forced into this corner, ended up advocating for clear, tangible policy positions, especially the $2,000, which is something that Americans love. Because $2,000, even if rich people are getting it, is always going to be good, because it's functionally a tax credit, right? Like, I mean, you can literally look at it as a tax cut. Republicans can't literally say tax cuts for the wealthy are good all the time because poor people are getting tax cuts, and then turn around and be like, never mind, if some rich people are going to get $2,000, it's actually bad now. No, Americans don't give a shit about that. They love when the government gives them direct money. They love that way more than that's a way easier argument to make than I don't know, social safety nets and, like, you know, paying for things that they will inevitably see later down the line, like Social Security payments and things like that, right? Unless they're literally older and getting Social Security payments and benefiting from it directly. So I think that whether by accident, whether on purpose, it doesn't matter. Democrats being backed into a corner to actually advocate for policies rather than running a referendum on Donald Trump being bad turned out to be really good, really fruitful, and is showing it right now. This is the reality, and I think no matter which way you look at it, maybe the leftists were correct, and it wasn't necessarily that, like, Warnock ran a centrist campaign and so did Ossoff, especially when considering the fact that both of them were pretty progressive when talking about 2K cash payments and numerous other things as well. Right.
They gave people something to vote for, and they voted. It's a remarkable thing to have seen. That it shouldn't be that remarkable. It shouldn't be the case that it's almost an experiment for Democrats to try to offer people something positive and affirmative to get them to come out to vote, rather than just saying they'll protect you from Donald Trump, or they'll protect the HCA, or they'll protect Social Security, or whatever else. It's like, good, okay, yeah, please, yes, protect all these things, but whatever. That just makes my life the same on Wednesday as it was on Tuesday. This was extremely explicit. Like, you want $2,000? Like, Mitch McConnell's standing in the way. You can get him out of the way by electing these two guys. And it's true that, like, they didn't support explicitly Medicare for all. They didn't explicitly support Green New Deal. And I think there should be some soul searching on the progressive side there. Why can't, like, why did these calculating politicians feel like they could run a progressive campaign, but that was too much, like that was going to hurt them somehow, like which they clearly felt, because they calculated, we're gonna use other language to say how we want to address the climate crisis, how we want to get everybody covered. Ossoff is an interesting case. He did an interview for my book, which itself I thought was kind of an interesting decision. And also, like, when he launched his campaign, like, his team and he reached out to The Intercept to be the first to break it. So then okay, you're going to run for Senate. We'll write that story. When you're launching your campaign, you make, obviously they placed it with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution as well, because you can't snub the local press. But when you're launching your campaign, you're trying to frame what kind of candidate you're going to run as. The decisions you make of where you try to pitch your candidacy to say a lot about what kind of race you plan on running. And so for a campaign to reach out to The Intercept and say, like, we want our launch to be first reported nationally in The Intercept, says that they're not at all running that centrist campaign that you're talking about. And when I interviewed him for my book, what he wanted to do was push back against the idea of him as this corporate stooge from his 2017 race, which
he definitely was.
It stung. So I'll give you his argument, so you see what you make of it. He said, I took no corporate PAC money, not a single penny of corporate money. I had more corporate money spent against me than any candidate in the history of congressional elections. Now, his argument for why his ad sucked and his campaign was kind of bland was, he was like, look, I was a first-time candidate. He was a Hill staffer and then became a documentary film producer, and he was a really good Hill staffer, actually, which I knew him a bit, and but Lee Fong worked with him.
Lee Fong talked about how he reached out to him to potentially talk about how lobbyists were. What was it? He tweeted about this earlier today. He talked about how, like,
they were basically creating malware that they could sell to companies to help them hack into rivals. And he was also one of the best Hill staffers on NSA surveillance, pre-Snowden. So in any event, so he said, he's like, look, I was a first-time candidate. I wasn't even, DCCC didn't want to even compete in the race. They didn't think it was a serious race because the guy the Republican had won by 20 points the last time. I wasn't even sure I was going to make the runoff. And then all of a sudden, I'm getting millions of dollars from anti-Trump people, pouring into the campaign, and tens of thousands of people door knocking and text banking and phone calling. And he's like, I just, wanted to, I didn't want to, kind of screw it up for all of these people who were believing in me. This is a first-time candidate. And so that's how you wind up with the kind of bland messaging. the tactical argument would be you're not actually going to have a problem with turnout in that race. Like the reason to do really strong progressive messaging beyond them to come out to vote, but with the enthusiasm that was around that race, turnout wasn't, and excitement wasn't going to be an issue, and it wasn't. There was massive turnout. It just happened that there were still more Republicans in that suburb. So people can take what they want from that, but if you combine that with seeing the pretty populist race that he ran this time around, I think that assuming that he and Warnock do win, I think they're going to be pretty solid, like progressive senators. They're not going to be Bernie Sanders, not going to be burning the place down, but they're not going to remotely be like Joe Manchin. Like they're never going to be somebody whose vote you're going to have to worry about. And if you did rally support for Medicare for All to a point where the votes you needed for it to get it over the hump were Warnock and Ossoff, I would bet you everything that they'd be there with the rest of the party. But you got to get the rest of the party there first.
You think? I feel like you think Warnock would also be not anti Medicare for All, but like he wouldn't be a champion for Medicare for All. I mean, I guess he's too fresh, and we are talking about the 11th black senator in American history, so it's not like in the first from Georgia, so it's not like he's probably not going to make a lot of risky maneuvers and maybe be as radical as he was from the pulpit or from when he was preaching clearly, but I don't know. I could see a coalition. Maybe I'm too hopeful, but I've liked Warnock. I think he's better than the rest of the Senate for sure. Rest of the Senate Democrats, or a lot of the Senate Democrats rather. I would put him on the more progressive side. Ossoff more of a moderate in my opinion, but
I think they're both basically for it. There's just something about saying the word that they for some reason is stops them from getting all the way there. Also, he's up for re-election in 2 years. Whereas because he's only filling out the term of Johnny Isakson, who so he's going to immediately start campaigning. Sucks for him. Whereas Ossoff, assuming he wins, he gets 6 years, and he could be senator for life. Because 6 years from now, if the demographic changes we're witnessing now continue to unfold, Georgia's going to be like a solid blue state, the same way that Virginia went. And there's this wild dynamic that you saw unfold in Virginia. You've seen it some other places too. Is that when the Republican Party goes from competing in a swing district to being in the minority, and a bunch of the reasonable-ish Republicans switch and become Democrats, the ones who remain are just complete nut jobs. And so the Virginia Republican Party has gone from like a fairly moderate party 10 years ago to just filled with complete maniacs now. And so they're completely uncompetitive statewide in Virginia, because in order to win the nomination there, you just have to be as crazy as you possibly can. And some complete nuts have won statewide nominations in Virginia recently. And I could very easily see the same thing happening in Georgia, where 2, 4, 6 years from now, the Georgia Republican Party is just like a QAnon cul-de-sac that it can't compete statewide.
You think Georgia's going to turn into that? That's what you're saying? Potentially?
With I think it's quite
Donald Trump's talking about how he's going to...
It has all the ingredients.
Yeah, because Donald Trump is also talking about like how he's going to play Kingmaker and how he's going to literally work against Brian Kemp, which is ironic because, he thinks Brian Kemp is crooked. So, yeah, he could really turn Georgia into this like crazy QAnon hellhole. I think... Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe we'll see what happens there, but I mean, this is if like both Ossoff and Warnock win, and then in that period of recalculation for the Georgia Republican Party, Donald Trump is able to take over and influence the outcomes greatly. But it doesn't seem like right now, because this race is so close, it doesn't really seem like Loeffler or Perdue had a different approach to it. Like they couldn't do anything. They're Republicans, and Republican policies are not exactly popular ones in the time of a pandemic. You can try to advocate for reopening the economy all you want, but ultimately, I think more people probably believe that we should be taking at least some precautions, or more people think that we should give people money, and people are suffering ultimately, and they deserve money. The worst thing you can do as a Democrat or a Republican, if you are a neoliberal Democrat or if you are a regular old conservative Republican, the worst thing you can do is allow people the opportunity to feel like they are entitled to get more from their government. That's the worst possible thing you can do. Mitch McConnell knows that reality. It's part of the reason why he fights very hard in the Senate to make sure that nothing ever passes or nothing good ever happens to the American working class. Like, that is a long-term ideological project, and that's why Mitch McConnell makes these actions that would otherwise seem insane to the average person. Like, why the fuck wouldn't you give $2,000? Why wouldn't you ever concede to just giving $2,000 to working class, and then literally say, no, that's not true. We know how to work with Democrats when we have to. Well, that's because today you give them $2,000. Tomorrow they're going to want more. And I think that's really damaging to the Starve the Beast project, that the long-standing goals, the long-standing ideological project of, conservative governance. So,
he was so, that project is so important to him that he was willing to risk the Senate to not give people the 1,400 of that 2,000, because he already gave him, he already agreed to the 600. So it was only, he was pot committed to that point. All he had to do was up it to 2,000 from there, but he couldn't do it. And I think you're right. Like it clashed too hard with his ideology. I think he thought he had a slightly better chance in Georgia than he did. And maybe he thought that, and he thought reasonably, he assumed that Democrats would not be as good as they were at capitalizing on that $2,000. Because given history, you would expect Democrats will fall on their face on this.
Well, they almost did. They almost did fuck it up in the end. There, like, they didn't extend it as far as they could, and I was like, oh no. Luckily for luckily for the Democratic Party, you have Bernie Sanders, who was like, nope, that's not happening. We are absolutely pushing for this. I will filibuster. I will do everything I can. I will put every procedural burden I can on the process to make sure that, like, I will use the other gift that Donald Trump gifted the Democratic Party again by vetoing the NDAA, which was which had a veto-proof majority in both the Senate and the House. But still, like, that was, if it wasn't for the NDAA veto that they had to vote on to override, Bernie would not have had an opportunity to again put the 2K spending in the spotlight, because they had to come back, they had to deliberate on that. So that was also another, like, that was a double gift that Donald Trump basically gifted to the race here in Georgia, and that's precisely why this race is as close as it is to begin with, and might end up with Democrats winning. So let's talk about the future here. Do you personally think that Democrats will learn from this? Do you think that they will actually start agitating for certain things, or do you think that this is going to maybe even hurt their chances of consistently shifting blame over to the Republicans and Mitch McConnell and saying, oh, we just simply can't do anything because Mitch McConnell is in charge of the Senate, and oh no, good things are not possible. Because Democrats, and I'm a little skeptical, I'm a little cynical, I'm a pessimistic person, but I think Democrats hate doing things more than anything else. They love losing gracefully, and they hate actually having to legislate, because that means you're expending political capital. And expending political capital, especially when you're trying to pass legislation in an expedient manner, is going to mean you're losing seats in the long run, because you won't do what's necessary to push for the radical policies that people may or may not want. So what do you think is going to happen if the Democrats control the Senate?
I think it will. I think it will change. Well, I think they'll pass the $2,000 checks. I think it'll be 1,400. There's already legislation there. But I think they will do that. You know, Joe Biden is 2 on record at that rally, that just in saying that you elect Ossoff and Warnock, we will immediately pass $2,000 checks, which everybody needs so much. Like the clip from him is just, it's too much. Like you can't go back on that. And I do think that Schumer has come around to the idea that doing things is going to be important for Democrats. You know, he came up in a time in the 80s when the conventional wisdom was that Democrats had been beaten by Reagan and thrown out of power because they did too much, because they're tax and spend liberals who were too up in people's business. And, you know, Ronald Reagan killed him with his line, you know, the scariest words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." And there was this massive shift in the zeitgeist around what government can and should be doing. And that's the political culture that people like Schumer came up in. But Schumer is an agile politician. Like, he's somebody who wants to continue to amass power, wants to be majority leader, and wants to stay as majority leader. And so that's his number one primary objective. It's not anything else. If he can do it on the backs of Wall Street and insurance industry money, great. If he can do it on the backs of small dollars and unions, he's fine with that too. It doesn't matter. He just wants to be majority leader. But he's also a savvy politician. And so, he was the one that really was pushing Biden on $50,000 in student debt relief.
Yeah. Why do you think that was? Do you think he's worried about a primary challenge or something? Like, what was that? Because that both came out of nowhere.
I think he's worried. I think he's a little worried about a primary challenge. I don't think he's necessarily worried that he would lose one. I think he's worried about having to run one. It would be embarrassing. It would be a sign of weakness, even if he won. Be a distraction from what he wants to do, which is try to become majority leader, which he may have finally achieved. And so partly it's that, but also I think he has recognized from a political cravenness perspective that that the parties and voters are sorted in such a way that what you need to do now is just feed your base good things, give them things that make them happy and make them want to vote for you. And if by doing that you can also peel off some people who are only loosely affiliated with Republicans who are like, "Oh, I got student debt, I'm for that," then all the better. I think that's his new calculus when it comes to how Democrats can build a lasting coalition, because that's what you have to remember. Politicians just want power, and whatever they think is the route that takes them to that power, that's the route they're going to go on. If it makes the world a better place, good. If it doesn't, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they're going to do it.
Oh, we'll see. I mean, it's the Georgia, like the Senate, vote totals currently in the race, by the way, do not see a change at all for Warnock, and Loeffler is increasing her lead. But I do think that again, it's all the way up to the remaining votes in DeKalb County, which will heavily favor Warnock and Ossoff.
New York Times is now giving Ossoff a 78% win probability, and Nate Cohn, the father of the needle, had said that he thinks the needle is being too conservative in its uncertainty estimates. So, in other words, he thinks that it's higher than that. So that's on Ossoff, whereas, like we said, Warnock was called already by Wasserman, and Times is up to 92% likely on Warnock.
Yeah.
So they need a miracle. Republicans need a miracle to pull this out.
I did not expect this outcome. I'm gonna be honest. I really thought it was a toss up only because of the 2K battle that came out of nowhere in the last second there. But but I really didn't think it was going to look like this at all. Currently, as it stands, though, Loeffler is 64,000 votes ahead with the last, again, DeKalb County. And David Perdue is 94,000 votes ahead with 1.9 million votes. Warnock still has more votes overall than John Ossoff. But it seems like it's going to wrap up with Democrats winning. I think that's what it seems like. Do you think what else is on Biden's agenda? Because people keep asking this question here in the chat, where is marijuana legalization actually going to be a thing? Like, I don't think that Joe Biden is interested in legalizing or decriminalizing marijuana, but I mean, there's a House bill out there. Like, what happens?
So Biden is not. Biden is the crime bill guy, as you know, the rave guy. Rave Act. But Schumer is, in fact, a huge advocate for political purposes of legalizing marijuana. And so in a situation where Schumer has a sizable amount of power, he could insist that Biden just get behind that. And he'll have sizable power because Biden is going to want, XYZ element of his Build Back Better plan. His Build Back Better plans, like a ton of money for clean energy projects, for green infrastructure projects, for infrastructure in general, broadband, satellite internet. Basically upgrading the country. Money
That'd be awesome.
Community colleges, money for universities and colleges. Colleges and community colleges need a massive bailout. Particularly, you can just do it for crass political purposes. Again, if Democrats are overwhelmingly winning college graduates, you can't allow half the country's colleges to go bankrupt, because then they're producing Democrats. So if even if that's all you care about, you need them to keep producing Democrats. They produce, in a globalized world, the countries that have a knowledge economy, that have an educated workforce, are the ones that are going to have higher standards of living. The ones who don't won't. So you can't let that fall apart. We do have one of the best university systems in the world. We've let it devolve into this completely unaffordable monstrosity. But you can deal with that. That's just an accounting question. Fix that. So those are the kinds of things that are on the table.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right, especially about college being a democratic factory for Democratic voters. I don't know why. It's like the easiest. It's popular. It's a popular policy. It makes absolutely no sense. Republicans know that it is a Democratic Party brainwashing factory, I guess, and they literally preemptively argue against it all the time. And yet I don't see Democrats making a strong enough case for it for some weird reason, when it is, as you also mentioned, going to make the American labor force more competitive in the global marketplace. So it's really stupid that that's not something that they would immediately capitalize on. So what do you think about the potential bottlenecks if there is a Democratic majority? It seems like it might be. What do you think about the potential bottlenecks? Like, do you think Joe Manchin is going to stand against the Democratic majority, ruin it potentially? Do you think that blue dog Democrats in the Senate are going to be the next? Like, how many Joe Liebermans are we going to have, if we have any at all? And how do we deal with that?
You have many fewer than you had. Well, so in 2009 you had 60. You eventually had 60 Democrats, but you probably had a dozen of those that were Joe Lieberman types. You're down to many fewer. Manchin types. Partly that's because their majority is smaller, but partly because Democrats are just a more uniform kind of progressive, center left party than than they were before, as these parties have gone through their ideological sorting. The interesting fight is going to come around the filibuster. Now, there's an annual process to get a little inside in the weeds here. So there's an annual process called budget reconciliation, which only requires 50 votes. And so at the beginning of the year, Senate passes a budget reconciliation instructions, which lays out what the Senate is going to be able to do in a massive bill with only 50 votes. And the rules around it are that it has to be budget related. Like you can't do abortion policy. You can't do a Voting Rights Act. You can't do policing reform. It has to be money. And you can do healthcare, but it can only, you can't do healthcare policy. You can only kind of throw money this way and that way at healthcare. You could spend money on infrastructure. You could spend money on clean energy. Spend money on tax breaks for solar companies or whatever homeowners who.
You could completely restructure subsidies, right? Like even this was something that the Biden administration, for example, ran on originally and then kind of changed quietly. But the Biden campaign said that they were going to completely restructure the way that our subsidies work for energy production, and claimed that not a single dime was going to be spent on fossil fuel subsidies, and all of that was going to be reappropriated to green energy, which I thought was an insane proposal. Like, I mean, it's great, but that's like Bernie Sanders level proposal. They quickly changed that somewhere along the campaign, like I think getting closer to the election. They also changed their stance on fracking as well, saying that like, oh no, we're not going to ban fracking. We're not going to ban fracking. They were like almost pro fracking for some weird reason. I mean, I know what the reason is, because they thought that was going to help them win Pennsylvania, when in fact you were writing about how that was not going to be as important in Pennsylvania as even Fetterman originally suspected it would be.
And even by the end, I asked Fetterman, and Fetterman was like, "No, nobody cares right now." Yeah, and partially that was because of COVID, I guess, but that's something that they could do. Will they do it is the real question. Like the question I have now, or the fears that I have now, is basically that like even if there is a Senate majority, which it seems like it might be, I fear that even with budget reconciliation, I feel like that's not a tool that Democrats are going to want to use, regardless of the fact that it is a tool that they could use, and that they're going to pull a Obamacare on a lot of stuff. And what I mean by that is this: I have an opinion on this matter. I'm too young to have like been there basically for the ACA battle, but my speculation, you can tell me if I'm wrong on this. My speculation is that like the ACA was a market-based proposal, and that was whatever, it was originally the Heritage Foundation proposal and all that stuff, which wasn't great. It was a socialization was a necessity, but it was market-based, and it didn't go all the way. But the biggest problem with the ACA, I think, the reason why Democrats expended so much political capital was because of how long it took. Whereas you don't really see that with Republican battles. I mean, think about, in comparison to the ACA, think about how quickly Republicans pushed through tax cuts for the wealthy. And I feel like expedience is the best possible way that you can eliminate a significant proportion of political capital, because Americans hate gridlock more than anything. They might be split ticket voters. They might be fucking idiots in the way that they think like, oh, there should be a Republican Senate to keep the Democratic president in check. But ultimately, I think Americans fucking absolutely hate gridlock. They hate it when Congress can't get their shit together. And I think no matter how good the proposal is, the longer it takes to pass a proposal through, the longer it takes to push through any sort of legislation, the longer bandwidth and leeway you have for Republicans to lie about it. That's why you had the death panels. And the more politically unlikely it becomes, or the more politically unfavorable that policy becomes. Because you can't give the opposition enough time to message around it and just lie about it, pretty much. And I think that's the most successful way to do things. And Democrats, I think, are too cowardly
to push for their actual legislative agenda in an expedient manner and always want to like compromise. And I think Joe Biden is literally one of the worst cases of this, and maybe even too much on the side of Mitch McConnell. What are your thoughts on this? This is what I'm fearful of.
Yes. Now that's correct. And I would add to that the ACA benefits also took too long to actually be felt. So it took 14 months or whatever to pass the thing. Passes in early 2010. It's not even really in effect. Budget gimmickry reasons, because the way that it was being budgeted was on a 10-year window, and they wanted to keep it under $1 trillion. And so they said, well, if we don't have this stuff take effect for 4 or 5 years, then we can say that within 10 years it's going to cost less than $1 trillion. Well, great. 2015, people still weren't really feeling the benefits of it. It was completely counterproductive, absurd, and cruel to people who needed help immediately and didn't get it. Millions of people that needed it. Turns out that the only real benefit of it, besides eliminating pre-existing conditions, was the expansion of Medicaid. The marketplace hasn't really helped anybody. It's unclear at all that has been much of a benefit. Now, the good news is that Schumer was in the Senate then, was watching this unfold, and he and Harry Reid were infuriated at the way that Obama was allowing Max Baucus to just drag out these negotiations for months and months and months. Problem for them was Barack Obama was and is extremely popular with the Democratic base, and what he said went. They don't have that same problem with Joe Biden. Joe Biden is the guy that people voted for because they thought he could beat Trump, but nobody has the kind of love that they had for Obama. So I think they're going to be able to call their own shots in the Senate, unlike how President Obama called the shots his first couple of years.
Yeah. I think that Chuck Schumer is a more of a pushover than Joe Biden is, though, or maybe he reads the room better than Joe Biden does. I feel like Joe Biden is more inclined to be a centrist than new Chuck Schumer, new and improved Chuck Schumer is, as far as I've seen thus far. I mean, he is not very good at, like, obviously whipping his own caucus, we saw literally that exact thing happen with Dick Durbin, his own whip, going against what Chuck Schumer was technically saying on television, like, we're going to be in lockstep with Bernie Sanders, whereas his own, whereas Dick Durbin was like, absolutely not. There's no filibuster that's going to happen. There is no way to, like, stop the NDAA budget from, stop the military budget proposal from going through. You're being ridiculous. And that was at odds with what Chuck Schumer was saying, but it still feels like Chuck Schumer might be more inclined to push for progressive agenda items than Joe Biden would be. And I feel like Joe Biden will most likely go with his party wherever his party takes it, rather than like a Barack Obama type who had a very clear vision on how to run the government. And that revolved around, for some weird reason, conceding to the Republicans nearly every step of the way, even when you didn't need to, when you literally did not need to.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Hopefully this changes the calculus for them, that they see that if they offer people something real, that people will come out and vote for them. And it would be great if both parties just tried to turn elections into bidding contests. Go ahead, let the Republicans offer 4,000 next time, and see where that goes. Like, that's what politics should be about. Who can compete to credibly make your life better?
Yeah, absolutely. Who would have thought that you know, not running on how bad Republicans are and allowing the cards to fall where they may is a worse way to run than just literally telling people like, we're gonna give you money if you vote for us, we're gonna give you money. The people that are literally stopping you from getting money are Republicans. The National Republican Party, led by Mitch McConnell. Do not let Mitch McConnell be the majority, be the Senate leader. Do not let Republicans control the Senate, and you will get money. Turns out people respond positively to that. That's crazy. I mean, that's so wild. I never would have thought that that would be the case. Oh my God. Except no, we've been fucking screaming about this for a very long time.
I thought if you just tell people you believe in science and you're going to restore dignity, that would be enough. But
yeah,
turns out.
I hope that this translates.
No way to do it.
I hope that this translates, because even the likes of Ezra Klein are coming on board with this notion now. But Ezra Klein always has like wishy-washy takes like this. He always takes like the middle ground approach where he's like seemingly progressive, but then all of a sudden he'll just say some shit where you're like, what? But like that goes against what you're saying. But the political lessons Democrats should learn from this, as Annie Lowry would say, just give people money. Don't get too clever with it. Don't do complicated tax cuts and hard to apply for programs. When people need help, just help them and trust them to use the money well.
Yeah. His wife.
Oh, that's his wife?
Yeah.
Oh, damn. Inside baseball, dude. Everybody's related to one another in the media. Yeah, that makes sense. This applies to healthcare too. Just give people healthcare. Don't take what they have away. Open Medicare to anyone over 50. Create a public option with Medicare pricing power. It's free for those who need it and available. That's literally, you're complicating it. You're betraying the original argument that you made, which is like Medicare for all is very simple. Already. I don't know why he has such a big boner for like, he has a big anti-Medicare for all boner. Anyway, it's fine. Anyone over 50, he says. Okay. All right. Well, Ryan, I don't want to keep you any further. It seems like this is pretty obvious is what's going on here, even though people are freaking out on my end, saying, oh no, we lost. Oh no, Democrats lost. What are we to do? Because they're looking at the vote totals currently without factoring in like the remaining counties. But luckily, that's why they're not doing analysis and they're just watching the election instead.
Yes. Yes. Go to the New York Times Needle, guys. Stop freaking out.
I mean, I hate the needle, so I wouldn't use that as the only source of hope there. But anyway, thank you for coming, Ryan. Where can people find you?
Thank you for having me. Well, check out the Deconstructed podcast over at The Intercept. A good one out today, and we're going to have an interesting one later this week. Interviewed Pramila Jayapal about where Medicare for All is going from here and what she thought of the whole forced to vote thing. I
gotta have you on to talk about that as well. I gotta have you on to talk about that whole forced to vote fiasco as well. Eventually, soon, and like how that went.
Need to, debrief on that and how something like that can never happen again. Good Lord.
Yeah, that was not a good look for the left, but luckily. Because the media just it refuses to even acknowledge that the left exists, especially the online left, unless it's literally Bernie Sanders and they can use that as a cudgel or a weapon against Bernie Sanders. Thank God no one talked about it in mainstream media. So that was good. That was the one benefit to this entire predicament overall.
Yeah, the tree fell and nobody heard it. So
thank God. So it didn't fall. Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, thanks for coming on, Ryan.
All right, man.
Bye.
Talk to you soon.
All right, that was Ryan Grimm of The Intercept, Washington, D.C. bureau chief of The Intercept, and also the host of the very popular politics podcast, Deconstructed. Okay? Yeah, that was inverted Hasan like in Tenet versus Hasan that is not inverted like in real life.